Hello and welcome back to the My First Marathon podcast, where usually we're interviewing runners in all stages of their running careers about their first marathon experiences, but today it's going to be just me. On Mondays, you're still going to get the episodes that you know and love with our guests that we have on and going through first marathon stories, but on Wednesdays now, I'm going to do little bite-sized episodes like this one where I'm diving a little bit deeper into topics that have come up on the show. Today's topic may or may not be a topic that I've been collecting answers from DMs and comments and all the things for the last 3 to 4 months and compiling a list of frequently asked questions for first-time marathoners. So that's what we're going to go through today. Without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the Wednesday mini episode. All right, I have collected 10 frequently asked questions. I've got them here on the screen next to me. We're going to be going one by one through them. And before we start, I just want to say that my answers are going to be going off of my own personal experience. If you're not familiar with my story, I am training for my 4th marathon right now, but I'm also going to be pulling off of the experience and opinions that I've heard from 80 plus marathoners that have been on the show as well. So that's where all of these answers are coming from. I always encourage you to do your own research and do things that are best for you because these are just opinions by some fellow runners. All right, let's get into it. Number 1, how long should I train before my first marathon? Meaning, like, what should the duration of the actual marathon plan be? So I did get this question a lot, and I think that it kind of depends because it depends on what you're talking about, right? Like the actual marathon plan is I've seen anywhere from 16 to 20 weeks, but a lot of newer runners or a lot of newer marathoners don't always realize that those 16 to 20 week plans do not mean couch to marathon. Those 16 to 20 week plans are usually assuming that you can run at least 8 to 13 miles and that you're probably running 3 to 4 times a week pretty consistently. So just keep that in mind that you might need to do like a little bit of a longer block to build your base before you jump into like a 16 to 20 week plan. Speaking from my own personal experience, I gave myself, I think, 4 to 6 months of base building when I was starting from absolutely zero before I started my marathon plan. But if you have some running experience, I've also heard other runners recommend at least 2 to 3 months prior to starting your 16 to 18 week plan to start base building before you jump into marathon training. So that can kind of be your guide. Question number 2, what's the longest distance that I need to run in training? Meaning, what is going to be the distance of my peak run in marathon training? First thing that I'll say is there is no reason that you should be running 26.2 miles before race day. There's a couple of different reasons. I think the most obvious ones is that you don't want to run the distance before you actually cross the finish line. Like, that's special. You want the first time that you run 26.2 miles to be the time that you get to be celebrated and crossing the finish line. But the other side of that is depending on your pace, so us middle of the pack, back of the pack runners especially, you can definitely find yourself hitting like diminishing returns if you do too long of a peak run towards the end of your training. I say that because 20 miles to a middle of the pack or back of the pack runner versus 20 miles to like a pretty fast runner can be a significant difference in time on your feet. So for your peak run, when you're deciding how long you want to run, just take that into account. Take into account how much time you're going to be on your feet versus somebody who is maybe a little bit quicker than you. As a guide, I have peaked out at 20 miles for every single one of my runs. I find that that is a good sweet spot for me. And in some marathon blocks where I felt like I needed a little bit more peace of mind and I wanted to run a couple more long runs, I'll just do multiple 20-mile runs leading up. The most I've done is 2, but I know some people will do as many as 3 20-mile runs leading up to race day, depending on the type of race, depending on the type of coaching they're getting, the plans that they're following, all of that stuff. So there's a lot of factors to take into account. There's also been several runners on the show that will go up to 22 miles, but 22 miles is the peak that I've seen from everybody that I've spoken to. So I would say give yourself anywhere from 18 to 22 miles, depending on your plan and depending on your pace for your longest run in training. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but for all of these, I always recommend like reaching out to somebody who has ran a marathon before if you're going to make a decision that's off of the plan that you're trying to follow, because somebody who's gone through before is going to have better advice for you and be able to help you make a better decision versus you trying to make that decision the first time that you're going through it. All right, number 3, and this is at number 3. I didn't put these in any particular order, but number 3 is probably one of the top 2 questions that I get asked pretty frequently, and that is, how should I choose my marathon plan, or which marathon plan should I choose? All right, in my mind, there are 3 types of training plans. There's the paper plan, so the Google search, the Pinterest search, the like pretty generic like couch to marathon plans or marathon and 18-week plans that you can find online. That's number 1. Number 2 is working with an app. So there's a lot of really great apps out there. The one that I am most fond of is the Run with Hal app. It's the Hal Higdon app. I find that I have trained the best and was the least injured when I was using that app. But I know some other ones that people really like are like Run On, the Nike Run Club app. I believe Runkeeper, the ASICS running app, also has a guided marathon plan. So there's a couple of different ones that you can choose from. And then the third type of plan is coaching. So I have actually had experience with all 3, so I'm going to talk a little bit about all 3. Okay, when I was starting completely from scratch, I did follow I think I followed a couch to half marathon plan just from Google, and that's how I trained for my first half marathon. The pros of that plan is it didn't allow me to overthink anything. The mileage was really, really simple. There was no speed work, there was no running workouts, there was no strength, unfortunately. I probably could have used a little bit of strength for that first marathon, but it was very, very simple, very easy for me to palate, very easy for me to follow. So, couch to half marathon, really found a lot of value in that. When I was deciding to train for my marathon, I couldn't find any of those paper plans that quite felt like they were going to fit into my life and my level of fitness at the time. And I think that that's the biggest con with those paper plans is they're not very adaptable. And when you're a newer marathoner or a newer runner, you don't quite have that skill set to be able to like make intuitive decisions about training quite yet. So when I was training for my first marathon, once I had hit the half marathon point, I switched over to the apps because I felt like those were a little bit easier to follow. And I could customize them a little bit more, if that makes sense. So training for my first marathon, I used the Run with Hal app, like I said, and it was very similar to the paper plans in the sense that it was really easy to follow. There was little to no speed work, and when there was speed work, it really explained it and broke it down on why you were doing it and how you were doing it, and all the instructions were really, really clear. So for a beginner runner, I found that really, really helpful. And I also loved how the app lets you like check off each run. That was something that helped me a lot mentally when I was working through training, is to be able to like check off those big runs because I felt like I was actually making progress towards something. So the apps I really love. I have had some like not so great experience with apps, overtraining with them and just not feeling like the workouts were quite for me. And so that's why I think it's important when you're training for your first marathon or any marathons beyond to, like I said, ask somebody when you feel like it's not comfortable or you feel like you're hurting yourself or whatever. Go talk to somebody, ask them how they train, ask them if they feel like you're overtraining. That's going to help you just with peace of mind, having some resources there. And then number 3, I am currently working with a coach for my 4th marathon. This is the first time I'm working with a coach, and I wish that I worked with a coach sooner. That's the first thing that I'll say. I know it's expensive, but for me, it's been worth every penny. I trained for my first 3 marathons, like I said, using the apps. And now that I'm working with a coach for my 4th marathon, the pros I'm seeing are, 1, it's a lot less stress because once you get past your first marathon, you are going to be more intuitive about your running and be able to make changes to your training based on how you're feeling. And that was always kind of stressful because you think you know what you're doing, but you always run the risk, or you always have in the back of your mind, like, what if I do something that ends up causing me to be injured or not be able to run this race? And then it's my fault. So having a coach has helped me a lot with confidence, peace of mind, all of that, of just saying, you take care of it. I'll give my input and I'll let you know what's going on in my life so that you can work around it. But just having somebody to like bounce ideas off of, to tell when things hurt, to tell when things are uncomfortable, and have them make the decisions, that has been great. The main thing that I want to get across with coaching, because I know that a lot of people for their first marathon, me included, were intimidated by a coach, is don't feel like you need to wait to be a certain type of runner to hire a coach. Like, you don't need to run your first marathon and then get a coach. You are a runner from the day that you put on running shoes, and you're entitled to good coaching and like you're entitled to a amazing marathon experience from the jump. So if you have the means to hire a coach, that would be something that I 100% wish that I would have done the first time around. Number 4, this is when I said I had top two questions I get asked most frequently. Last one was number 1. This one's definitely number 2. And that is, how do I fuel and hydrate during long runs and for the race? First thing with that is training is for practicing fueling and practicing hydrating. So you're gonna make mistakes during training. That is okay. Those are all learning lessons for you for what works best for your body, for how to take in fuel. In some instances, you have to train your stomach to take in fuel if it's not something that you're used to taking, which if you're running your first marathon, it's probably something you're not used to taking. So there's a lot that go into it, but use your training runs and use those long runs as your time to test things out. I always recommend, and I'm a little biased, but I always recommend Fuel Goods for something like that, for a newer marathon. I actually just got my mom one of their runner boxes because she's training for her first marathon right now, because it just comes with a lot of different options for pre-run fuel, during run fuel, post-run recovery, and you can really play around with a lot of different options without committing to one brand. So that's something I would recommend, just playing around with different fuel options. In terms of when to fuel, everybody's different, so I'm going to be very careful with how I give this next piece of advice, I guess. I will tell you from my experience, this is my fuel strategy, and this is what's worked really, really well for me. Every 15 minutes, I'm consciously thinking I need to take a couple sips of water. In the past, I've looked down at my watch and seen, 2 miles, 3 miles, and I realized I haven't taken a single sip of water, especially in the summer. That's super dangerous. So I do a 15-minute timer for making sure that I'm taking a couple good chugs of water and electrolytes. And then every 30 minutes for me, that's when I'm taking in a gel, a chew, I'm taking in some sort of fuel. So you can use that as kind of your rule of thumb as well if you need a starting point with fuel. But like I said, you're going to need to make adjustments. So that's just a starting point. Do what feels best for you. Little side tip. I'm somebody that doesn't do a great job carb loading before a race, and I don't do a great job taking in enough carbs like the day before, the morning of, all that good stuff. So for race day and for my long runs, I'm always taking some sort of carb mix with me on the run itself so that I don't have to rely on taking in carbs before I run. So for me, the two that I really like are Tailwind and the Scratch High Carb Mix. Those two have been really, really great on my stomach, and I always feel fueled. So those would be my recommendations if you like on-run carbs and fuel. Number 5, how long should I taper before the marathon? This is another one where people have different opinions on it. I have heard of a 1-week taper, I've heard of a 2-week taper, a 3-week taper. I, in one instance or another, for all 3 of my marathons, have actually done all of those. I had a 1-week taper, a 2-week taper, and a 3-week taper. I think the sweet spot is 2 for me personally. A 1-week taper I had to do because I had an injury and I had to cram my training block into a really short period of time. So I didn't have the luxury of a 2-week taper. And that felt so rushed and my legs did not feel fresh by race day. So if any more experienced runners are listening and you've done a 1-week taper, I would love if you would DM me and tell me how you do that because I felt super rushed. I didn't love a 1-week taper. 2-week taper, I love. That's my sweet spot. I feel like the first week you're still working off of tired legs, but you're starting to decrease mileage, so your brain's feeling a little bit better. You're feeling a little bit less of that like training fatigue. Your appetite's getting back to normal, all of that. And then by race day, my legs felt really, really fresh when I did a 2-week taper. For my first marathon, I did a 3-week taper just because, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing and I was just following a plan. And the 3-week taper, I started to get antsy. So that's where my legs started to feel a little bit cold. I feel like the same thing with the 2-week taper. The first week I was starting to feel better. The second week I was ready to go. Third week I was like, can we just get this thing over with? So for me, I would definitely recommend a 2-week taper. I love this next question because I am a race strategy kind of girl. Number 6 is, how should I pace the marathon itself? For me, this is the strategy that I use. I use the 10-10-10K rule, which is pretty common. If you want to learn a little bit more about it, you can Google 10-10-10K and you could probably find a lot of resources around it. But it's basically breaking down the race into 3 parts. First 10 miles, second 10 miles, and the last 10K. The reason why that works really well mentally for me, if you've ever heard of runner's math, it's that same concept. It's in my mind, I can break the race up into 3 miles, essentially. The first mile or the first block of 10 miles is my warm-up. I'm looking at those miles to start slow. I'm looking at them to stay consistent, but I'm not worrying so much about pace. The few things that I'm really focused on are starting slow, fueling really, really well, and fueling really early as well. So first 10 miles, those are my warm-up, quote unquote. The second 10 miles in my brain are like the base miles. So you've gotten through your warm-up, now you're doing the base miles, which are trying to hit a pace but not trying to do too much, still maintaining a really consistent fueling strategy, still making sure that you're staying up on hydration. You're just really focused on getting ready for that last push. And then the last 10K, this is where I switch everything up. I switch the music that I'm listening to. I switch the flavors of the fuel and the texture of the fuel that I'm taking in. It's go time. I look at that as the workout miles. If you've ever done like a progression run, it's very similar to that where you have the warm up, the middle, and the workout miles. I look at that last 10K, that last 6 miles as, okay, this is the race. This is what I really need to, where I really need to lock in mentally. This is where I need to pull out all the stops. This is where fuel and everything becomes even more important. This is where I need to be doing body scans and checking in with myself. That's where I want my mind to really lock into place if I've been like spacing out for the last 20 miles. And I've done this strategy for all 3 of my marathons and felt like mentally this was really, really great. Number 7, what's Jeff Galloway's run walk method? I'm not the best person to answer this one, but I threw it in here anyways because I've gotten a lot of questions about the Galloway method. I just haven't had any experience with it myself. I would recommend going back and listening to Erin Azar. I'm Mrs. Space Cadet on Instagram and TikTok. You might have seen her. We did a really great episode where she actually talks a lot about the Jeff Galloway method and her experience with it. So go listen to that one for some more advice. But if you're not familiar with it, it's a run walk method where you run for a certain amount of time and you walk for a certain amount of time. And a lot of runners actually come back and say that their pace either stayed the same or improved from when they were running straight through the marathon by doing the run walk method. So if that's something that sounds more appealing to you, definitely look into it. There's a whole lot of resources out there for the Jeff Galloway method. Number 8, what should I prepare for the days leading up to race day? I think the only factor to really take into account here is if you're traveling in or not, because I do think that makes a difference. If you're traveling in, you're probably going to need like 24 hours to acclimate. You're going to need to plan your meals. You're probably going to have to bring food with you so you're not eating anything or drinking anything that you haven't had before and risking like potentially an upset stomach. I would say rule of thumb, if you're local, if you're running a race out of town, don't try anything new on race day. That's the biggest piece of advice I have for this one. You're going to go to an expo, probably. It's going to be very exciting, especially if it's a bigger race. There's going to be all sorts of gear. There's going to be all sorts of new fuel and vendors and all these things that are going to make you really excited to try. But do not try anything new on race day. Like, put that in your suitcase, lock it away. Don't even think about adding in any of that new stuff on race day. It can definitely lead to injury. It can lead to your race going sideways. You just don't even mess with it. But some things that you should be doing the days before. I'm a big fan of a shakeout run. I usually do the shakeout run either the day before or 2 days before, depending. If I'm doing it 2 days before, I'll do a 3-mile run. If I'm doing it the day before, I might do like a mile or 2 mile, or really just whatever my legs are feeling. If you're going to a bigger race, I love to go do a group shakeout run with people. I've hosted them in the past too. It's all a really good time. It's really good excitement to like motivate each other and encourage each other for the race that's coming up in the next couple of days. So definitely would recommend that if you can find a group to run with. Otherwise, some things that you could do, you could study the course layout. You could decide where you're going to put your spectators on the course, because I think it's really helpful if you have some family or some friends that are coming to support you, to put them at specific places where you know you're going to need the most support. So you could do some of that planning. You could plan out your food. You could lay out your gear. You could kind of mentally prepare for your race strategy. So there's a lot of things that you can be doing, but the few things that you shouldn't be doing are being on your feet a lot the days leading up to the race. So don't get caught in the tourist trap of walking around a bunch before your marathon, and don't try anything new on race day. Number 9, should I be doing any sort of strength or cross training for my first marathon? I think I said it a few minutes ago, but I did not do any strength or cross training for my first marathon, but that is one of my biggest regrets. I was so focused on just getting to the finish line and building my running base that I just felt like I had no time or no energy or anything to do any of the other stuff. And frankly, until I started strength training and saw how it impacted my running, I was like, that can't help as much as people say it does. I just need to run. So can you run a marathon without strength training and cross training? Yes. Obviously, I've done it. A lot of runners that have been on the show have done it. Is it recommended? Probably not. I would say, if anything, start with like one strength day a week. And there are a lot of really great apps out there that you can find strength workouts to do at the gym. There's also a lot of PTs out there that have their own like individual strength programs that you can pay for individually and kind of work through like self-paced on your own. But yes, I would recommend doing strength and cross training through your first marathon if you can swing it. I would start with 1 to 2 days per week for strength training and try to incorporate cross training in anywhere that you can, but do it in doing something that's like normal in your day-to-day life. Like for me, I was cross training during my first marathon. I wasn't being intentional about it, but I'd go for a hike every once in a while. I'd go for a bike ride. I'd go for a swim. So there's ways that you can cross train and not completely like upend your life or your marathon training plan. Strength training is going to be the more difficult one, where you're going to need to make time for 1 day a week or 2 days a week to strength train. But coming from somebody who's ran a couple more marathons, I wish that I would have strength trained for my first marathon. And number 10, this one's probably my favorite. How do I stay mentally strong and motivated through training for my first marathon? The reason I love this question is there's so many ups and downs that you're going to go through training for your first marathon, and you're going to need to ride those waves. So you're not always going to feel mentally strong. You're not always going to feel motivated. So it's kind of a tricky question to answer, because if you were 100% motivated for every single run for 18 to 20 weeks through your marathon plan, you're a different human than me, right? Like, and most people, you're going to have runs that you don't want to go on. Your alarm's going to go off at 4:30 in the morning for you to run 10 miles, and you're going to snooze that thing and say, this is the last thing that I want to be doing this morning. And I think that's totally fine. I know now, being on the other side of running my first marathon, that those were the moments that taught me the most about myself, and those were the moments that probably helped me the most once I got to race day. Those moments where, yeah, I didn't want to get out of bed, I didn't want to go on the run, but I did it anyways, or I didn't want to run in the rain, but I did it anyways, or I didn't want to do a speed workout, or I didn't want to do my strength workout, but I did it anyways. Those are the moments that were coming up in my head when things got really, really hard for those last 6 miles of my first marathon. All I was thinking about was, you had that really tough 15-mile run that you didn't want to do, and you did that one. You've ran 6 miles a million times when you didn't want to, and you ran those miles. Like, those are the moments that you're really, really going to pull on when things get hard in the marathon. The other thing that will help is knowing why you're going to run the marathon, and then really, really being crystal clear and hanging on to that why throughout training, especially when things get hard. So in training for my first marathon, how I came up with my why, or what fell into my lap with my why, was I had just moved across the country. I had no friends, no family out here. I started running as a way to cope with feelings of loneliness and depression and anxiety about the whole move and things that were going on in my private life and things like that. So my why was I want to prove to myself that I can still accomplish something. Because I was a team sport athlete in a past life, and accomplishment was my entire life. Like, if I wasn't accomplishing something, I wasn't winning, I wasn't being a good human, all those things. So my why was I want to prove to myself that I can accomplish something hard again, so that after I run this marathon, hopefully I can take that with me and continue to tackle really hard things and get through this really uncomfortable period in my life. When I was training, I held on to that for dear life. Like, when things were hard, I kept thinking about the person that I wanted to be and the person that was going to cross that finish line and the person I was going to be after I crossed that finish line. So I definitely recommend sitting in that for a little bit, figuring out why you're running the marathon, what is the reason why you're doing this, and then hanging on to that throughout training. All right, those are the 10 frequently asked questions asked by all of y'all over the last couple of months. Hopefully that was helpful. I want to add in one bonus tip here. I got a couple of questions. It didn't make the top 10 list, but I did get quite a few questions about post-marathon recovery, and I've made the mistakes. So I'll share with you what mistakes I've made and what I would recommend there. So for post-marathon recovery, my first marathon, I crossed that finish line. I got my banana, my t-shirt, my whatever, got in the car, got to the Airbnb, and I was sat. I laid in that bed for 2 hours. Food was being brought to me. Like, I just sat in that bed and did nothing. And when I tried to get up later that day and the next day, oh my God, you guys, like, that was almost harder than the marathon. I was so stiff. It was painful. Miserable. So for my second marathon, I knew that I needed to not sit. And I actually walked around and took pictures with people afterwards. I walked to get food. I went inside the grocery store after with my boyfriend. Like, I just tried to keep moving, tried to move around the yard, just tried to not be stagnant for more than, 30 minutes or an hour. And I can tell you, I feel like I could have ran the next day. It made a huge, huge difference. So that's my bonus tip for you for post-marathon recovery. After you run your first marathon, you're going to be exhausted. Everything's going to hurt, but try your best not to sit still. Try to keep moving around, because you're going to thank yourself later, and you're going to get back to running a lot quicker, training for your next race or training for fun or whatever you want to do if you move around after your race. So thank you so much for tuning into this bonus episode of the My First Marathon podcast. Like I said, my goal is to get these bite-sized episodes out every Wednesday, so stay tuned for that, and we'll see you on the next one.